I'm Carol Garoes, to simplify it for the purpose of pronunciation. Otherwise, I would have said I'm Carol Garoes from Namibia, the Secretary General of the Namibia Women in Sport, African Women in Sport Association, and the Africa representative to the International Working Group on Women and Sport. And the issue of our participation in women in sport has always been on agendas, except in 1994, there was an organization created, and Namibia was represented at the time by the Honorable Minister of Sport. This was organized in Brighton, the UK, the organization of International Women in Sport Group, the IWG. The UK Sport hosted the first conference on women and sport, and Africa was represented. After that meeting, Africa decided to host because it was believed then that if we host, it will assist with the sensitization and the networking to improve the status of women in sport and the girls who participate. Because as you know, for years our girls have participated in sport. But every time they do not go beyond participation as athletes. And we wanted a situation where they can break through and reach the level of being policymakers, coaches, managers, etc. So Namibia hosted the Second World Conference on Women in Sport in Windhoek, 1998, just before the Second World Conference on Women in Sport. AWISA, which is the African Women in Sport, was launched, and 32 countries participated, African countries participated in the launching of it. The headquarters was then in Namibia, the president of this association being Honorable Evola, the minister at the time of youth and sport. From there on, it was a challenge because we had to get the association accepted in the mainstream. Mainstream being it should be a member of the Supreme Council of Sport in Africa so that we can participate and represent women at that level. So in 1999, during the preparation for the All Africa Games in Johannesburg, AWISA, which is the African Women in Sport Association, was admitted as a full member of the Supreme Council of Sport. That being in place, we were able now to get off the ground to start working. We created structures alongside with the structures of the Supreme Council, because the Supreme Council for Development, they have got development structures in 7 zones. Africa is divided in 7 zones, and AWISA had to create structures along those zones so that we can work together. That was great achievement. The admission of the Supreme Council, of AWISA into the Supreme Council, and the creation of the structures. We considered it a great achievement, because it enabled us to get to the countries, the member states of the OAU, to sign the Brighton Declaration. The Brighton Declaration actually set the program of inclusive, of how to empower women and the promotion of women into leadership. Most of the countries, most of ministries of sport, sport commissions, and sport councils, signed the Brighton Declaration. And we moved and organized and mobilized Africa from that end. The structure of AWISA was such that a zone created its own structure. The members of a zone elected their own people from their own countries within the zone. And the chairperson, the director of that zone, automatically becomes the executive member of AWISA. So that way we kept a link between the countries and at grassroots level, because every country must come up to their zone structure and then zone structure come up there. Having done that, all those achievements, we were faced with a great challenge of mobilization, because all these things, for them to happen, we needed resources. Now, the countries were supposed to pay membership within their zone to allow their own executive structure to do the mobilization. But unfortunately, in most cases, that could not happen. It could not happen because, first of all, it was seen as a threat. Here is a structure, women in sport, it's isolating the men, it was misunderstood. And yet the objective was promotion of gender equity, which means it was addressing the concerns of both men and women, except women were the most disadvantaged, so there was more attention. The headquarters of Women in Sport, African Women in Sport, remained in Namibia with the assistance of the Namibian government. The Namibian government continued to fund this body up to now. We are still struggling to have Congress in order to re-elect and see whether this responsibility can be passed on to the next country, or whereby we can get funding or sponsorship. It is difficult to get the sponsorship for a continental association as opposed to a national. But basically that is where we are. Namibia continues to carry the cost for all the activities of the headquarters, and the attending of all the meetings finance that. However, there are 2 zones out of the 7 zones which are relatively active in that regard. And that is Zone 6, because the Council of Ministers of Zone 6 made it a point that the Supreme Council Zone 6 have a desk for women in sport. And every country, every member state there accounts for their activities in the area of women in sport. And so there is more organized structures within that zone. And then Zone 7, where there's Mauritius, Seychelles, and the Comoros out there. The Mauritius government carries the cost of the headquarters. Their zonal headquarters is in Mauritius. So the mobilization around there is, and communication is also improved. But we have got Zone 3, the headquarters, it's in Nigeria, and we have Zone 2, the headquarters is in Mali, and then 4 in Cameroon, and then we have got 1 in Algeria. Those are troubled areas whereby now you have challenges in getting this organization getting off. However, that does not mean that the women and girls are not continuing to participate in sport. They continue to participate in sport. The numbers have increased, and they are winning medals as such. But we still have an area whereby we need to continue working hard is the area of leadership in sport. That is what has taken me to this far about women in sport in Africa. When it comes to athletes' participation, say women's soccer and men's soccer, you get the two happening. When they are admitting codes, it is soccer for both women and men, volleyball for both women and men, basketball and. However, in the area of leadership, we still say within the Association of African Sport Confederations, where the confederations are affiliated, which is key during the All Africa Games. That body itself, it still have serious gender imbalances. You still have, I think we have one woman in there out of probably about 10 men who are seated in there. So those areas are still affected. That means when you come to elections, to voting, the council itself is predominantly male. So it is the boys' club voting for each other. So in those areas, AWISA needs to continue working hard. Hopefully, with the change which is coming, the transition, we may see more women coming in. AWISA is a member of the Supreme Council, sits in the Supreme Council, continues to mobilize and sensitize the members at that level, the council at that level, to bring the awareness. Because you see, for women to come at that level, it is from the club level. At the club, they need to elect women into executive positions. And then from club, they will move on to national. National, they reach an area like the one in All Africa Games, controlled bodies. Yes, I think in Africa, that concept was visited. It is still being discussed even up to now, but it is called the quota system. The quota system, associations, confederations must ensure that they have got a certain percentage of women within their associations. The percentage was low. It was something like 5%, and it was said it must be raised from 5% to 10% to gradually. But that has not been enforced per se. They had many, many arguments about it. That would have been a vehicle of making of faster change, because the clubs would be forced to have 10% representation in their executive as women. And then the national associations would have to carry the same percentage up to the continental level. But it is true, if that implemented, that is another way of getting women into policy-making positions at the top faster. Yeah, and unfortunately, she is not a member of she is in the IOC, but not in ANOCA, the African National Olympic Committees. So we do invite members like that to participate and contribute to our discussions, mobilization, and at a certain level. But directly as a member, because she's already a member of the IOC, she's at the top, higher than the African body. You see, AWISA is not a member of the IOC direct. So the lobbying she can do, it's supposed to be within the Supreme Council of Sport in Africa, because AWISA is the member of the Supreme Council, which is supposed to assist with this transformation at that level.
the Supreme Council, how do you assess its efficiency, its contribution to it was very political at the beginning, I think with what's his name, Jean-Claude Ganga. They fought against apartheid to isolate South Africa. They were very active, and they were very active also promoting all African games. But it seemed that we are less on the continental scene today because the African games went years without being held anywhere. Many other games are taking over African sports. The Supreme Council, how do you assess its visibility, its efficiency in promoting sports on the continent today?
Yeah, the Supreme Council consists of 3 membership. The African National Olympic Committees, the Association of African Sports Confederations, and the African Women in Sport Associations. Particularly these 2 bodies, are charged with the actual providing of the sporting codes and developing them and brought to the Supreme Council for All Africa Games participation as members. And in that regard, the Supreme Council is still active, because if we look back in 1965, when Congo was the first country which hosted, at the same time we had this friendship games going on. There wasn't any organized Pan-African Games until 1962. From 62 on, the cycle is supposed to be on 4-year rotation by member states, and member states must bid. And it has been going on relatively well, in that for the last past 60, I think 65 was Zimbabwe. From Zimbabwe, 65, 4 years it was South Africa, then back to Nigeria, then 11 it was Maputo, Mozambique. It is taking place. It has, in that area, we can say they are visible. They try and ensure that it continues. The All Africa Games continue. In this transition whereby the AU specialized agencies now are going to become commissions and sport is going to become a commission, we hope to up the legacy. But unless we are saying we want to change it from 4-year cycle to 2-year cycle, but remember that when we have these games, they are linked to international games. Because if we are having All Africa Games at the same time when the Olympic Games are going on and the Commonwealth Games are going on, they will clash. So when we are planning, this 4-year cycle allows the participation of Africa in All Africa Games and Commonwealth Games. So if ever there is anything, because when the countries started in All Africa Games, I think it was 30 countries. Now the last games were 53 member states, which means it has improved. And from 1963, at the time of the Congo, the athletes were only 2,500. The last group in Maputo, it was 5,000, which means it has doubled. And the number of sporting codes allowed to participate has also increased. I think there were 10, now there are 23 in that area. If you look at those numbers, then you can see that there is improvement. There has been gradual improvement in the handling of the games by the Supreme Council, because it also has its own limitations, and within those limitations they manage to get the games going within the 4-year cycle. and keeping to the international participation in Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games. Women in Sport was created in 1998, May. And the headquarters of this body has been in Namibia ever since. So Namibia has technically been carrying the responsibility of maintaining this body in order to assist Africa empower women per se through sport. It is a cost in the sense that everything, the representation, I'm the Secretary General. If I have to travel, Namibia must fund and must cover all other costs, even of running the offices. But that is, in a bigger picture, viewed as, a lack of better word, payback time. Africa, we need to plow back and assist each other to make it a better place. For Namibia to be in a better position in terms of its gender programs, and the world, the countries, the member states around it still remaining behind, that will not help Africa. But Namibia, as part and a member of the AU, has a responsibility towards Africa, just like all other countries during the struggle had a responsibility to ensure that Africa is freed, including Namibia. So that is how we view this. It's a costly exercise, but it's a